So we're here in this undiscreet, nondescript location, this crazy open wheel vehicle. So the story behind this is I was on the mountain. It's the 101st running of the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. And I had a bunch of people tagging me saying, I have to check out this 4A-GE Toyota open wheel, insane, very sinister looking black race car. We have Merle here who's gonna walk us around this. This is your baby, and you're actually driving this.
Yeah.
I don't actually know anything about this, and that's the beauty of it, because we're gonna be doing a lot of learning today.
Okay.
We wanna show everybody what this is about. So, what is this? Why are you here? What are you doing? What's going on?
Well, I had this crazy idea during COVID that I wanted to make a car that I could tour around the country and do some odd things that doesn't really conform to anything that's standard. So I decided to throw the rule book in the trash and build something the way I wanted to build it.
What is this? What are we actually looking at?
This is a Swift Formula Atlantic. But it's a hybrid by a long shot. Basically, it has the appearance of a Swift 016, which was the last generation of the Formula Atlantic Pro Series. So it's like a 2006 Swift 016. And that's what it is from the roll hoop forward. But that car, actually in the Pro Series, it had a Mazda Cosworth in it, which was a 2.3 liter engine, much larger engine. I decided I wanted to put the Toyota 4A-GE in this car. I've always had a close working relationship with Toyota and TRD, and I wanted to use that engine because I figured that it would package nicely into this. If I tried to use the last generation of Toyota 4A-GE race cars, which was the Swift 014, it's a much smaller car, and so to fit all the turbo packaging, I would have had to change all the bodywork and everything. So like this, I basically took a 2.3 liter out and put a 1.6 liter in, so it packaged nicely. But it took a lot of customization, a lot of unique parts, a lot of CAD work, but it all worked out nice. We can take the body off and show you.
So I do recognize the front end a little bit because I did have a chance to shoot the Formula Atlantic series a couple times. I shot it in Long Beach when they were competing. And I actually remember the tires that they were running at the time. For whatever reason, they were like a size that I could run on my car.
Oh yeah.
So I took a couple takeoffs. But what year did they actually run the 4A-GE in Formula Atlantic?
Basically, it ran in the Atlantic Pro Series from like the late 80s through the mid 2000s. I believe 2005 was the last year of the Toyota in the Pro Series.
And then were those built by Hasselgren or?
Well,
I don't know what's the
only
history
in the
behind
final
that.
2 years of that series, like I believe it was 2004 and 2005, it was a spec engine by Hasselgren. Before then, anybody could build them, like anybody. I could build one if I wanted to, anybody. As long as it was built within the rules, it was essentially poor man's F1. So you could do anything that you wanted. And that's the way it was all through the 90s, early 2000s. There was multiple engine builders going on. It was only the last couple of years of that.
And then so the back half of this chassis-wise is from the older generation?
I mean, the engine is certainly from that generation of car, the bell housing, a number of different bits and pieces. But then I again used the Swift 016 transmission because it was stronger. They built it a little beefier because of the 2.3 liter engine, had more horsepower. Actually, that car was intended to be even more powerful originally when it was the first concept was designed of it. So they beefed up a lot of things that allowed it to be able to handle more horsepower. And for what it's worth, it's actually handling this torque and horsepower really well.
So then I understand that you're a Toyota fan and you're a Toyota person, but wouldn't it have made more sense to just keep the 2.3 liter engine?
No, I mean, it's not just that I'm a fan, it's just that engine packages so nicely. When you see it in there, the 1.6 liter 4A-GE is really one of the best racing engines designed because it has the lowest center line of the crankshaft of any engine. You can get the engine in there very low. It's a very compact engine. You'll see that. So like even the crankshaft is so low in the engine, we actually had to install it all at a 2-degree angle. And that's actually common even on the 014. So everything that we built from this back, from the center bulkhead back, had to be built with 2-degree installation, because if you kept the engine at a 0-90 install, the transmission would be dragging on the ground in back. So you actually have a 2-degree tilt to get the transmission high enough that you're not banging it off the racetrack.
I have so many questions. There's obviously a lot of these in existence in terms of like the chassis. What do people typically do with them? Is it like historic racing or?
There's still some series around for it. I mean, the Formula Atlantic, it's a very popular car. People love them. It drives great. It has good horsepower. It does everything well. It brakes good, corners good, good acceleration. So it's a very popular car with race car drivers. There's still a Pro Series. It's basically an East Coast Pro Series for the most part. So there's an avenue for it. There's also SCCA racing where you can still race Formula Atlantic. And then there's also a number of vintage series where you can race even the 016 and much older Atlantics. So there's a lot of venues.
So then what's your history behind this? Is this something that you were racing in before? Or
yeah, I've basically been involved in Atlantic since 2001. You know, we've done everything from the Pro Series to a lot of SEC. I've done 12 national championships. We've won 12 national championships in SCCA with various drivers and myself and other drivers. So I've driven a lot. I also have a shop where I maintain a lot. I've had as many as 18 Atlantics that I prepare in the shop myself for various drivers. So.
Where are you guys actually based out of?
Well, I just recently moved back to Kansas City, my hometown. So before that, I was based in Indianapolis.
And then, like you said, this was a dream project of yours. Essentially, you're trying to build the perfect version of this?
I wanted to build a great Atlantic, and then I just decided that I wanted. The way it really started was I found a racetrack that I'd never seen before. During COVID, there was kind of those first couple weeks where there was a lot of doubt of what was going on. We didn't know what was going to happen to racing. We didn't know if racing was going to continue at all that year or period. It was just a lot of doubt. And I was looking something up online, and I found a racetrack that I'd never seen before. And I thought that was odd because I've raced for a long time, and I thought I knew all the racetracks, and this was a really cool track. And so I started looking it up, and then I actually found a whole number of tracks in North America that I'd never seen before. And so then this idea sprang of like, how could I get to all of those tracks? Because the reason we hadn't gone to those tracks is like the sanctioning bodies that I race with don't race at them. But then I thought I want to go to those tracks and have a car, capable of like being the fastest car that's been at some of those tracks and stuff. And then Formula Atlantic is that in its own right. But then I didn't just stop at racetracks. I decided Randy Rule, the race director at Pikes Peak, has been a longtime friend of mine. I've known him for 30 years. He's actually worked with me in racing before. And so then I started talking to him like, hey, could we run this at Pikes Peak? And he's like, absolutely. So I decided that's when the turbo came into effect. And so then that's when I started adding turbo and then getting more exotic with it from there.
That is so cool. Which track was it that you found that was something?
It was actually Palmer, out east. I think it's called Whiskey Hill sometimes, but I still haven't been to it. But I would like to go to that track. But I found a whole number of other like private tracks and tracks that have been built in the last 5 years that I had no idea.
So this is like time attack taken to the extreme. This is kind of like,
in essence,
what a lot of people have said about, for example, like the 919 Porsche when they retired that.
Yeah.
They think, what if it went to Laguna Seca or whatever, Nordschleife or whatever, all these places, and it has, broken so many records. But what if they took it to all these other places? What's possible? And it's cool that, in essence, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And honestly, a lot of Pikes Peak fans, including myself, I've been covering this race since 2011. I've always wondered what it would be like if a true Formula car came out and competed. I know there has been some champ cars. Mm-hmm. There has been something similar, but not exactly this. Maybe not as lightweight and not as developed.
That was one of my goals too, is like originally I wanted to keep it looking as much like an 016 as possible. That's one of the reasons I didn't, because even if I had kept the 2.3, let's say, I would have had to modify that bodywork. It would have got very bulky. A lot of it wouldn't have packaged well. So the idea was to keep it looking like an Atlantic so people could recognize that car, because it's really a great car, because it's one of the most affordable high-performance Formula cars that you can get. And you don't have to go this exotic. You can, but like they're tremendous fun to drive like the normally aspirated versions. So like if people recognize it and then maybe get interested in Formula Atlantic themselves.
Did you buy the chassis during the shutdown then?
Yeah, actually this chassis was a crashed tub that I built from like just a bare tub and then built it from spare parts that I had from various other projects and things. So.
All right, I have so many more questions, but before I get into that, let's dig into the engine. Is it possible for us to take the cover off?
Yeah, we'll start taking the covers off.
All right, cool. So many cool things about this vehicle. And you guys have it down. Look how fast they are. I'm not even gonna pause this. You guys are just amazing. Also, I do have to say, I really appreciate you sharing this because this is a passion project.
Yeah.
It's not like you're trying to hide any secrets.
Well, that's the thing that I also wanted to do about the project was it was basically like, I have no secrets on this car. Like you can stick a bore scope down the engine if you want. Like I have nothing to hide from this build. I'm full open book on the project. So yeah, I kind of want to share it with people to like inspire somebody to do the same thing, because basically I made this as like a bucket list car. Pikes Peak is the event that we chose to kick off the whole program, but I want to do every event that this car can possibly do. Not just your classic road courses, but like unusual events like Pikes Peak, like Bonneville, a number of the various open road races.
Wait,
things
do you
like
want
that.
to take it to the Salt Flats?
Let's take it to Bonneville, yeah.
Oh my God.
Let's do it, man.
You're
I
insane.
wanted to do it.
You're crazy.
Yes, definitely.
I would love to see that.
So, yeah, we'll go ahead and take the side pods off too. So, like, there's the basic shot of the engine, but we'll pull the whole bodywork off.
Yeah.
See
Oh my
everything.
goodness. No way. So all of that, is that all carbon fiber?
Yeah,
all those body
you
panels?
can feel it. It's super light.
And it's all gold line and everything? Look at that. Amazing. Do you have spare panels or anything?
We have a number of spare parts and everything. So I still have a couple of 016s at the shop. So we have a good amount of spares for the cars.
This is just so interesting to me. Honestly, I knew this was special, but I didn't realize it was like this.
Yeah.
And part of it is that it's pretty subtle. I mean, it being all matte black or satin black, it's pretty subtle looking, but then when you look into it, obviously it's so insane.
Yes.
How close is this to a 4A-GE that you would find in an A86?
I mean, it's basically the block in the head. That's it. Everything else about that engine is pure racing. So it shares the block in the head, but even those are like heavily modified from what they are stock. But then from there, cranks, rods, pistons, valves, cams, every part is racing.
And this might be a stupid question, but why is it that originally the 4A-GE was used for the Formula Atlantic or for these chassis?
I'm not sure what originally kicked the idea off. I think it was just a well-packaged engine, very small and compact. Like before then, the dual overhead cam Cosworth engine was like the common engine in Atlantic at the time. And then they started doing the Toyotas. And it was quite an evolution. I mean, because that was, again, like a time where people were doing all kinds of things, crazy things. I remember the original versions. I've heard some crazy numbers of 11.5 on RPM, things like that originally. We don't rev them anything near that. That's actually the beauty of it, because a lot of people are concerned that like the Toyota is overstressed in these cars. And like as an Atlantic engine, typically we run them for 1,500 miles, but an Atlantic is a high maintenance car. So you basically do have to take care of them. Most engine failures that I've seen are related to either an error by the team or the driver. It's very rare that I've had engine failures that are just a pure parts failure. And the beauty of this project is we're actually not pushing the engine as hard as we do in normally aspirated configuration. The only thing that's like potentially stressful is if you start trying to do too much boost pressure. Like the block in the head can't handle that kind of boost pressure, but we're not running anything crazy. We're like 24 PSI on maximum boost.
So then how much power is this package making right now?
Just over 600.
That's a lot from a 1.6
Yeah,
liter.
and that's at the wheels, so that's like a chassis dyno number.
So then how much power typically in this, like if they were using it for open wheel and it's naturally aspirated, how much
Naturally
power
aspirated, it was about 240, 250, depending on people's dynos.
That's still a lot from a
Yeah.
1.6 liter.
Yeah.
And that's why you're saying they're pretty wrung
Yeah.
out at that point. Like,
Yeah, it was highly stressed to get to that those kind of figures. A lot of RPM. There's a lot of flex. Like once you start going over 9,500 RPM on these engines, you get a lot of crank flex, and that causes a lot of the wear and tear. And we're shifting well below 9,500 with the turbo version.
got it. Okay. So then how much of this stuff is something that came out of like the turbo package, and how much of it is something that you've added on, or is this all you?
Well, basically, the base engine is typically what you would see in any configuration. The plenum and the plenum piping and such, this is all the turbo configuration. This is actually part of, we were going to have like a different plenum designed. We ran out of time. And so this, the plenum, it's working well. It's a compromise for what we would really like to have.
But this was something that already existed. You didn't make that custom.
No, we made that custom.
Oh, you did?
So,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So engine builder in Australia, MT Engine Performance, they had a fabricator there and worked together and designed and built that.
This is just so crazy. I got to look at the yeah. I just want to look at the turbo side.
Yeah.
My goodness. So crazy. So then this is the intercooler?
Yep, intercooler.
Amazing.
So it's very efficient too. I mean, it's all working really well.
But like all this stuff, was this existing already, or did you make all
No,
this
that's
stuff?
all been designed. I mean, a lot of this is where a lot of this is custom designed. All the headers, the duct, the cooler, all of the engine mounting, the trunnions, they're all custom made pieces.
So, because this never ran as a turbo.
Yeah, this has never existed. And we've actually made a couple versions of the turbo exhaust already. So this is version 2, and this is working really well.
I'm so blown away. So then when it's a NA version, what is this duct used for?
This is, well, on the 2.3, this was the intake side. So the Mazda Cosworth, the Duratec, it was basically a Duratec, but they called it a Mazda. It has the intake on this side and the exhaust on that side, whereas Toyota is reversed. So there is basically an oil cooler on this side, and the upper half of the duct is the air intake. And then on the other side, it had an entirely devoted to water radiator. Whereas, so what we did here is we did an intercooler, and on the other side, we split the oil and water.
Insane. So this is where your oxygen is mounted?
Yeah, we're running
Is this something
oxygen.
you guys planned out already?
Yeah,
building
that's something we planned out already. It's for the mountain. I'd say 90% of the field is running oxygen for the mountain, so it's a wise thing to do.
Yeah, you really feel it, especially muscling this thing around.
Yeah, at 14,000 feet, you got to figure that if pilots are required to have oxygen above 15,000 feet, and we're finishing at 14,000 feet, and your heart rate's up, the car's very physical to drive, and so what they found many years back, like 10, 12 years ago when they first started running oxygen, was there was like a lot of errors being made from oxygen deprivation. So a lot of drivers started running that, and now the majority of the field runs it.
Yeah, because while pilots need to wear it above 15, they're not muscling, they're not like having a whole workout. Because this truly is a big workout for you to muscle this up the mountain.
Yeah, it's very physical. I mean, the downforce that this produces, when you're at 4,000 pounds of downforce, you feel it. The steering becomes very heavy. The cornering, the G-forces in cornering and braking is off the chart. Now, we're not getting as high on the mountain because what I've experienced so far, and this is what I'm learning in my first year at the mountain, is their grip levels are really low. I've heard for race day to expect it to be a little bit better. But so far through practice and qualifying, the track's it's very dirty compared to a normal racetrack, so it's tough. I'm learning with so few runs. I've had so few runs on the mountain. We've had bad weather this month, but the biggest thing I'm learning is not if this is a right-hand corner. I'm learning what's the grip level, how hard can I push before the car starts to skate off.
So, and then also another thing is the effect of the downforce is probably different from the start line to the finish.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thinner the air gets, the more it loses downforce. I mean, and the thing is like, this is very close to a stock configuration of Atlantic. I have done some tweaks here and there, but it's probably like 5 to 10% off of what it is stock. If I had more time and money, this thing would be completely arrowed out, and you could do a lot more aerodynamically to get even more downforce.
So have you had any chats with Robin, Shoot, or anything?
Not really. We've chatted like at testing and things like that, but nothing in detail about the car.
I feel like you guys are probably the closest in terms of like car preparation, and similarity. It's really, really cool to see this, and I hope this is just the start. I know a lot of other teams, a lot of individuals would be interested in running an open wheel up Pikes Peak, but like this is the start. So then one big thing that you did have to modify for safety is the cage.
That roll
these
cage.
never had a cage.
No, none of that was designed in there. So that was quite a project. Originally, some people have kind of questioned like the design aspects of it, but like this roll hoop was built to Pikes Peak spec. I actually drew up a halo in CAD and submitted that for design approval and stuff, but they wouldn't approve like a halo design because a halo is essentially designed to protect you from oncoming debris. So it goes high here and then it comes down here. So because the rollover protection is still on any Formula car, essentially the rollover hoop and then the center bulkhead. So that's your rollover protection. It's not really, the halo is not meant to be added rollover protection. It has worked like that on a time or two, but essentially it's made for oncoming debris. So Pikes Peak would not approve that design. So like this dual pillar and then maintaining the height throughout the entire cockpit is required by Pikes Peak officials. And the reason that is because there's a lot of irregular ground up there that's not like flat tarmac, so they're trying to protect intrusion into the cockpit in the event of a rollover. So understandable, that's their rules, and so we built it to their rules.
So then was it hard to bolt it to the chassis? Or
Basically what we've done, this had to be all redone in carbon. So I had these pieces cut out, hard points installed here. Like a chassis tub is divided into, this is the front bulkhead. These are the strongest points of the car. It's the front bulkhead, middle bulkhead, and then rear bulkhead. That's where they build reinforcement to the tub to keep from twisting and like protect it from rollover. So this is actually considered like a rollover structure right here. So hard points were added in here. So then we tied the roll hoop into the actual center bulkhead, and then we brought it back, and then we did the same thing in the back. We tied it into the rear bulkhead. So it's a pretty stout rollover hoop.
Because I see that there's like this, it's an aluminum block.
We had to do something because obviously it wasn't designed for anything like that. So we had to, again, we put hard points in the top there. We put a block because there's an angle there, so that the rollover hoop was basically mounted square. We put that block in there.
And then the fuel tank, is it still the normal fuel tank?
Yep, this is a basically 16-gallon capacity fuel cell. This part of the car is really the strongest part of the car, so the fuel cell is always located like in this area of the car.
And do you just run less fuel for Pikes Peak? Or
less fuel. I mean, we're probably running fuel loads between 5 and 8 gallons.
And so then with this chassis setup, is the motor structural?
The motor is completely structural, yes. I mean, it's hard to imagine when you see it like this that there's a lot going on here, but the entire back of the car is attached to the front of the car via 8 bolts.
That's
this bulkhead, so there's 4 in the trunnion, there's 4 on the engine that is connecting. There's 4 bolts that hold the engine on, 4 bolts that hold these trunnions to the back. So if you want to simplify it, you can say that there's 8 bolts holding the back of the car to the front.
And then the transmission is just directly bolted to.
Yeah, this is your oil tank.
Oh,
so bell housing here. It's a dry sump system, so this is your oil tank, and basically the transmission bolts directly to the bell housing. So the back of the car is the engine and transmission for the most part.
So cool. So then how much of the suspension have you modified, or is this largely
The suspension
unchanged?
is 016 wishbones and rockers and many of those pieces. There was some aspects that had to be designed because the 014 bell housing has some differences. It required some new parts to be machined and made for the car.
Because this is truly unlimited and you're pretty much, from your knowledge of doing all this racing for so many years, it's got to be so much fun for you to modify this just for all-out speed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So like even all these little things, I don't know if you...
Yeah, those are basically pieces. Like I said, I ran out of time and money on the project. So basically what I did was I went around the shop and I found parts that I could like make them work.
Right.
And so that's one of them,
Yeah, because that's not something that was on...
No, that's not stock. And quite honestly, that wouldn't be legal in most sanctioning bodies because that's an aerodynamic piece attached to the suspension. Normally any aero pieces have to be attached to a sprung part of the car.
So then what does this do? What is the concept behind this?
So this is a tunnel-based car. Like the entire Atlantic is basically a huge wing. So from here back, this is one gigantic wing. And so you have a lot of flow coming off the front of the car. And you have a big wake coming off the tire. I would actually make these bigger again if, like I was kind of limited on parts and time. So, but like you have a big wake coming off the tire that's interrupting the flow to there. So basically you're trying to clean up the flow as much as possible to the tunnels.
That is so neat. And then what about, did you add any, like, this is extended?
Yeah, this has been extended. This flip up is different. Actually, the gurneys here, these gurney tabs right here. This is not, you normally don't run that on an 016 in the center. But it's very close to a stock
But
wing.
all these little things really, I mean, you can probably feel the difference, huh?
And the car has handled amazing from day one. That is one thing. We've gone through the normal teething issues of a new engine program and sensors not being right, and we were losing turbo boost at places that we didn't realize it would happen. So we've had little issues like that, but from the get-go, the car has just been handled amazing out of the box. I mean, this has actually improved the handling of the 016 substantially over what it was. The center of gravity has been lowered dramatically from what the 2.3 liter Duratec is.
I mean, even this little piece here,
Yeah.
you made custom. What does this actually do?
It's basically a Mercedes copy or something, But the biggest thing that I was doing was trying to make the car light, and believe it or not, I took 1.5 ounces out of the windscreen. So,
It had a windscreen.
It had a windscreen all along, but it was like full windscreen and everything. And so I'm taking weight off in all these different places, and things like this in and of itself. I always say that if your entire update consisted of taking 1.5 ounces off your windscreen, that's no update at all. But make 30 improvements like this and you're getting somewhere. But if you never start with the first one, you're never going to get there. So, but what this does is, even with this standard one that's straight across, you have a lot of air spilling into the cockpit. It creates a lot of turbulence for the driver's head. You get buffeting. And so this is basically creates a number of vortexes. So the air vortexes off and actually creates like less turbulence. Like a turbulent flow sometimes actually creates more like attachment to the air.
So have you done wind tunnel testing in this?
No wind tunnel testing, so no budget for that.
Hopefully after this, you have budget
after
for
this.
that.
That's right.
Once you prove yourself. So then let's talk about the cockpit. Is the steering wheel from that era?
No, that's basically like IndyCar level steering wheel setup. Basically the blank plate is what you'll find in a lot of IndyCars. This is the same display that is what you'll see in IndyCar currently. The switches and that layout is all custom for what we're doing here.
And then it is paddle shift?
Yes, yep. And we had provision for clutch also, but again, we ran out of time to program it and whatnot.
So then how do you roll out? How do you start it?
We have a foot clutch. So we were going to use the hand clutch, but then we just decided that we have too much going on and not enough time to get it all sorted out, that we decided to stick with the foot clutch.
This just gets crazier and crazier.
Yeah.
So this is all molded for your body?
Yep, molded seat. BSS in Indy did the seat. It's a really great seat.
Just so insane.
They also did the head surround.
I can't believe it. So then with this motor, do you have to like preheat it before you start it?
Yeah, we do it. I mean, it's a good thing to do with any racing engine. You know, racing engines are built to a certain tolerance. It's good to preheat them in any case. But with this, one of the reasons we did it is we're running E85. And so sometimes on the mountain, thinner air, it's more difficult to start the cars. So preheating the car makes it much easier to start when we get on the mountain. So we do have water preheaters. We have tabs for that right here. So that's what these are used for. This preheats the water. We have a heater, external heater over here that preheats everything. And then we're actually just running heat pads on the tank. There's one on the bottom, one on the side there for warming up the oil.
Oh, you just plug it into power and then it heats up the...
Yeah, and it gets the oil pretty hot.
That is really cool. Why is there a nitrous bottle here?
Well, there's a nitrous bottle there because we're using that to help particularly low-end boost. One of the issues that we've had is with the transmission and me deciding to use the SG4 instead of the SG3. The SG3 gearbox was the transmission that went with the Toyota engine. It was with the 014 car, and so it had a ring and pinion that's designed for those basically 9,000 to 10,000 RPM range what that wants to run in. The SG4 has a ring and pinion that's more designed for the 7,000 to 8,000 RPM range that engine ran in. But again, we chose the SG4 because it's stronger. But the problem that leaves us with is we're running the lowest ratios we possibly can in first and second, but it's just falling way out of the RPM range of boost in the corners. So it was awful off the corners before. And so what this does is we're not like dumping big horsepower boost in there for that. This basically runs from like 3,000 to 6,000 RPM. It starts to phase out at 6,000 RPM when the boost starts to take over, so that I can come off a first gear corner and floor it and I have something. Whereas before we added that, I would floor it and just wait. And that's the way it's actually been here, like during qualifying and everything. I would come out of a first gear corner and just floor it. And I would wait sometimes 2 to 3 seconds before anything would finally happen for taking off. With that, night and day difference.
Oh, because you tried it with it on and off?
We've tested it. We went to La Junta Raceway and did a lot of testing, and now it's just instant on. So now in first gear, like taking off, I couldn't even like leave the line before because I would slip the clutch, and take off, and I'd just have the throttle matted, and until it got to 6,000 RPM when the turbo would start to spool up, then it would take off. So it was just awful taking off. And the thing is like some people were saying, well, why don't we do like launch control and stuff? First of all, that doesn't work in the first gear hairpins. It would only work at takeoff. But the other thing is like we are pushing the torque and horsepower of what all this drivetrain is rated for. So doing launches is bad. I don't want to drop a drive shaft or something like that right on the starting line trying to do a launch. Yeah,
because how much power was the 2.3 liter putting out with this transmission?
It was, they had targeted 300 horsepower, but really they came in around 285 horsepower.
So you're doubling
and I'd
that.
say like 175 foot-pounds of torque. And we have the capability of being 400 foot-pounds of torque, but we've actually tuned it back a little bit because we don't want to break drivetrain parts.
From what you've driven already on the fastest sections, are you close to top gear in this thing up on the mountain?
Yeah, we're using top gear. So like 140 mile an hour is what we're doing so far, but really that's below the car's potential. It will be faster. I mean, I'm convinced on race day it will be faster.
Yeah, especially when you get to connect some of the sections.
Yeah, the thing is so night and day better in the sub 6,000 RPM range. Before it was just no response, and now the response is it's lightning, night and day.
And this bottle, is that for the shift?
This is the shift bottle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Normally we do run a compressor, but for mountain purposes, an air compressor is just like a human. It has a hard time breathing at 10,000 plus feet. So we decided to, instead of run the air compressor, we would use like a pressurized bottle to just supply like a constant pressure for the shifting.
And then electric water pump here?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And what is this, oil cooler?
Oil cooler.
radiator that's big enough to
Yep.
cool this.
Yeah, plenty big.
Even with
Actually, even on the mountain, believe it or not, this oil cooler looks very small. We're running 50% blockage. We've blanked the radiator 50% for the mountain. We'll probably take a little bit of that off on race day, but not much. So for all of our qualifying runs, we've had over 50% of the radiator blanked. So, and the water, we haven't had to blank it because it's maintaining like a very, steady 190 degree water temperature, and a lot of that is because of the electric water pump. And the reason we went with electric water pump is because, just going back to the fact of talking that we're like low RPM in a lot of first gear corners. So as you go up the mountain and you lose air density, you also lose cooling ability. And then if you have a mechanical water pump, when you fall into the low RPM, you also lose flow because you're running at low RPM. So between low air density and then low RPM from the mechanical water pump, I just decided to not even test it that way, and we went straight ahead with electric water pump just so that we had constant flow, even at the lowest speeds and highest altitudes.
Does this have an alternator?
Yeah, it has an alternator. It's kind of buried over here under the exhaust. McLaren supplied the alternator for it.
Oh, that is so cool.
So it's heat shielded in there because it's in a hostile environment.
Oh, I see. And then there is a battery too then.
Yeah, the battery is tucked up under here.
That is so cool.
So it's a Braille lithium-ion battery.
And then what about the brakes? Is it the same system from the chassis?
It actually is the same system. So I'm not running any updates on brakes for the car. I might be interested in doing something like that if we continue to do a lot of like track running with the car. But for Pikes Peak, for what it's worth, the runs are so short that really this brake setup is working really well because it's getting the temperature into the pads and rotors right away. And
basically like first corner.
Yeah, first corner. As long as I've been running heaters and stuff on the car, it's been working right off the bat. So we have good temp and it's not overheating at the top.
We could probably talk for a lot more time on this. I mean, there's just so many things to dive into, all the little things, all the modifications. But I really wanted to pick your brain about how hard it was to get to this point. You really started up high in terms of like Pikes Peak as your first event with this vehicle. That's a lot of people's eventual goal to get to Pikes Peak, but you started there. How hard has it been? I know you've been running around all over the U.S.
Well, I knew it would be difficult, but I can tell you that it was even more difficult than I ever imagined. I tried not to underestimate it, but I can tell you that it's the most challenging thing I've ever done in racing. And I've been racing for 30 years. And I've done all types of racing, pro and club and everything in between, and this is the most challenging thing I've done. It's just the test between car and man, I can't think of a greater challenge in racing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hate to say this, but it's hard for you guys. It's hard for us too, Yeah. I think on Tuesday, I've never been so cold in my life, legitimately. We started at the top, top section, winds 40 mile an hour plus, and we looked at the, feels like it's, when you look at the weather app, it tells you, feels like 12 degrees.
Yeah, 12.
So maybe I wasn't so prepared for that, but with that said, I couldn't have put it better. It is really, truly a test for all of us.
Well, and plus the other thing is I've been racing a long time and I've had aspirations to do all sorts of racing. I would love to do Le Mans. I would love to do Indy 500 myself. I've participated in other ways, but I'd love to have my own team as a driver, as an owner, anything like that. If you list every iconic race in the world, I don't have the budget to be able to compete in that on my own. I could try to go get a job with a team that does it, but I want to do it as Swan Motorsports. Well, Pikes Peak is one of the most iconic races in the world that I can actually participate in. And so that's one of the reasons I chose this as the initial challenge.
Yeah, because this being as crazy as it is, you're racing in the same race as Romain Dumas in that Ford crazy super van, and you're also racing in the same race as that Toyota Tercel that was just garage built.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of Pikes Peak, and that's why we love it so much.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. This is just so cool to see your inspiration, and hopefully you inspire a lot of other people to get into this. But another thing is, it's just inspirational for me even just to look at this, because we're just all car nerds. So thank you so much, and good luck. So today is Saturday. Tomorrow is race day.
That's right.
And hopefully it'll be good weather, you know?
Yeah.
The mountain, she lets you go up if she wants to, or she gives you a good traction, or this, that, and the other.
I hope
It's really up to her, so.
I'm hoping she's agreeable tomorrow.
All right. This is one of those moments where we stop rolling, and then there's still so much more to talk about. But what's going on with this?
Basically, this is one of the things that has transformed the car the most. This is a third spring setup. I actually robbed this off of a Lola Champ car, and then I got a front one that's from an IndyCar team that helped me out with a third spring setup there. But before I was having to run such stiff springs, the car was producing so much downforce, because even though it's stock, it is more, and with the speeds, the aero was just pushing the car into the ground, and I was rubbing the bottom of the car off. I was up to like 1,200 pound rear springs, which is no good on the mountain. We need it's great for like a lot of high speed tracks, but not for like low grip, Pikes Peak situations. So what this does is basically allows the suspension to lower, and this controls the ride height from bottoming out against the track, and then still has roll, because this works as your sway bar here. So this comes down and stops the suspension from hitting the ground, but then still provides roll. I'm actually reduced the spring rates by over 400 pounds, so it's a much better grip. And then I've done the same thing to the front. These are all kind of very retrofitted. This car was never intended to have anything like this installed, so again, it was difficult. I had to install hard points and all this to be able to have this strong enough, because this has taken a tremendous amount of load as it compresses, but as the car comes down, this stops the car from bottoming out against the track. And really, it's been a mega transformation as how the car handles. It's a massive improvement.
Because this is something that pretty much wouldn't really be necessary on the stock vehicle.
It would help the stock vehicle as well, but with what we had with the added downforce, it was a must.
The first time I ever seen a setup like this was actually on Rod Millen's Toyota Tacoma.
Yeah.
And I was just so blown away, because it makes so much sense. The chassis is just getting compressed so much from the downforce, and it needs its own suspension, essentially, right?
Yeah.
But then, which still allows for the movement of the control arms and everything. This is so cool. And this is your pedal box area here.
Yep.
So cool. Amazing. Have you made any aero adjustments since you've been here?
No, I basically set it at max and left it alone.
That's a good quote. Set it at max and leave it alone. How much does it weigh?
1,200 pounds without driving.
I can't believe this weighs 1,200 pounds. That's nothing. This video just keeps going. So it being 1,200 pounds, that's kind of one of the big advantages versus an electric vehicle, huh?
Yeah, I had a goal for it to be my goal was to be 1189, but it came in at 1206. So now since then we have added a few things, like we had to add rally safe and oxygen, so that has also increased it like another 6 or 7 pounds. So we're probably closer to like 1220 or 1225 as it sits right now.
Because no matter what you do with an electric vehicle, you can't overcome the weight of the batteries.
Yeah.
And it's not something that goes down as you get up higher at Pikes Peak. And also another thing that a lot of people don't realize is the degradation of power. When the motor's getting hot, the batteries are getting hot, they're not at full power.
I mean, for sure. I mean, like, weight was the number one thing in consideration, because horsepower is important, but again, we're kind of drivetrain limited. Like, we could have tried to do 750 horsepower, but with that torque and horsepower at that range, we would have really been risking the drivetrain that we have. So what I focused a lot on was taking weight off the car. So when I took one 1.5 ounces off the windscreen, there was a purpose behind it, you know, like, because there's probably like several dozen things that I took 1.5 ounces off of. Sometimes when I'd make a 1 pound improvement, it was like, you know, that was a big gain, but there was so many like 1 ounce gains all over the car, just taking it down to weight.
And then, what about loss in power for this going up the mountain? Is it pretty steady, or can you feel it?
Well, the guys that I'm working with, Nick Pawlowski and Imtron on this, like they're masters at it. Like they're so knowledgeable on mapping this thing up the mountain. I don't notice it so much. You know, I don't notice a big power loss. It's amazing.
Because essentially what you're doing is you're just boosting more with the available air as you're going up.
Yeah, it's such a complicated formula for, I mean, they say it's not that complicated to them, but like to me, it's, you know, I'm so focused on other things that I just let them do their thing, and they tell me about it, and it's pretty remarkable what it does, because like I said, even at the very top, I don't notice like a huge fall in performance.
Now that's the third time we've ended this video. Maybe it'll be a fourth time. All right, last thing. There's some 3D printed things on here.
Yeah. Well, we with the turbo, we have extreme heat issues, like compared to like a normally aspirated. So what we're doing is trying to eject as much heat out of the engine bay as possible, and these have really worked amazingly well. So we had these shark gills we designed these in CAD on both sides, and then had them 3D printed. We could have made them in carbon fiber, but it was much more costly, and the time frame was much longer. So the 3D printing actually worked really well.
And you have this cool little air scoop that you guys made too.
Yeah, then we put this scoop on. So basically we have a center scoop there that's basically just, I need air over the front of the engine right there.
Does it, is that something that exists in the stock?
No, it's just flat right there. So this scoop is entirely and doesn't exist at all.
You could tell that there's so much heat because it's actually melting the 3D printed material.
Yeah, this is plastic. So, but right there, right when you get done with the run, like normally on a racetrack, I would have a cool-off run. I would try to cool it down for a lap and bring it into a stop. At Pikes Peak, you cross the finish line and shut off, and you have about 100 feet to coast down and stop. And at that point, it's baking down inside there. But really, this is plastic, and it's held up quite well.
See you guys in the next video. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to support us directly, go to LarryChenPrints.com. I print and sign every single one of these. This is the perfect gift, or it's the perfect piece of art for your wall.